We like to think we're rational, that when it comes to big questions, like meaning, morality, or the origin of life, we weigh the evidence, think critically, and come to a reasonable conclusion. But that's not how the human brain works, not by default. The truth is, our thinking is riddled with shortcuts, cognitive biases, fast, automatic rules of thumb. Our brains evolved to save time and energy. And while they help us navigate everyday life, they also leave us wide open to manipulation, especially when it comes to belief systems. Religion didn't spread across the world just because of deep wisdom or moral insight. It spread and stuck because it fits perfectly into the cracks of our flawed reasoning. It doesn't fight our biases, it rides them. And it's been doing that for thousands of years, often without people realizing that their faith is built not on truth, but on cognitive traps. Let's start with confirmation bias. This one's simple. Once you believe something, you start seeing proof of it everywhere, even when the evidence is weak or ambiguous. If someone believes that prayer works, then every time something good happens after they pray, it feels like confirmation. Every time it doesn't work, they'll explain it away. God has a plan, or it's a test of faith. Religion teaches people to look for what supports their beliefs and ignore what contradicts them. And because confirmation bias feels like self-discovery, like you found the truth, it's incredibly persuasive. But it's not just about evidence. It's about authority bias too. From childhood, most of us are taught that religious leaders, priests, imams, monks, gurus, speak with moral or even divine authority. That their words carry weight not because they're reasoned or tested, but because of who they are. And once that authority is granted, it short-circuits critical thinking. People stop asking hard questions. They defer, obey, and accept. Now combine that with social proof. The idea that if lots of people believe something, it must be true. This bias runs deep. Our ancestors depended on group cohesion to survive. So going against the crowd triggered fear. Today, religion leverages this by surrounding people with others who believe the same thing. Churches, mosques, temples, they don't just offer spiritual guidance, they create echo chambers. Communities where doubt feels dangerous and belief feels like belonging. This plays into another bias, the in-group/out-group effect. Once someone's identity is wrapped up in a belief, they start seeing the world in terms of us and them, believers and non-believers, saved and damned. This mindset reinforces loyalty, but it also breeds suspicion. Anyone who questions the faith becomes other. And when dissent is framed as moral failure or spiritual rebellion, real dialogue becomes almost impossible. And then there's pattern recognition, the way our brains look for meaning in randomness. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. If you hear a rustle in the bushes and assume it's a predator, you might survive. If you dismiss it, you could be lunch. Our brains are wired to see agency where there is none. That's why people see faces in clouds or divine will in weather patterns. Religion taps into this by offering agency behind everything. God made it rain. God saved your child. God punished that sinner. It doesn't matter how random or explainable something is. Once you believe there's a conscious mind behind the universe, you'll start seeing intention everywhere. There's also the sunk cost fallacy. The more time, emotion, and energy someone invests in a belief, the harder it becomes to walk away. Even when doubts creep in, even when the evidence piles up, people stick with their faith, not always because it still makes sense, but because leaving would mean admitting they were wrong. For years, maybe decades. That's painful. And religion knows it. It often demands better and more investment over time, not just money or rituals, but identity. So walking away doesn't just mean losing a belief. It can mean losing a community, a family, a worldview. Another big one is the just world hypothesis, the idea that the world is fair and people get what they deserve. This bias is comforting, especially in a chaotic world. Religion often leans into this, teaching that suffering is part of a plan, or that justice will come in the afterlife. It tells people that everything happens for a reason, even when it clearly doesn't. And that belief can stop people from acting, from challenging unfair systems or helping others, because they're told suffering is somehow righteous or necessary. We also tend to fall for availability bias, believing something is true or common if examples come easily to mind. So if someone hears one story about a miraculous healing or a person whose life turned around after finding God, it feels meaningful, even if it's an outlier. Religious communities often amplify these stories while quietly ignoring the countless cases where nothing happened. It creates a lopsided view of reality. Fear plays a huge role too. And with fear comes loss aversion, our tendency to fear losing what we have more than we desire, gaining something new. Many religious teachings hinge on what happens if you don't believe. Eternal damnation, divine punishment, being cut off from the community. That fear keeps people in line. Even if their belief weakens, the cost of letting go feels too high. Better not to risk it. You can also see cognitive dissonance at play. When people hold two conflicting beliefs, like God is good and millions of innocent children suffer and die, it creates mental discomfort. To resolve that tension, religion provides ready-made answers. God works in mysterious ways, or it's not for us to understand. These phrases don't explain anything. They just ease the discomfort. They allow people to keep believing by avoiding the contradictions. And then there's the illusion of control, our tendency to believe we can influence outcomes that are actually random. Prayer, ritual, sacrifice, these give people a sense of control in situations where they feel powerless. Facing illness, death, disaster, it's comforting to feel like you're doing something. Religion offers that illusion. It makes uncertainty feel manageable, even when there's no real connection between the ritual and the result. One of the more subtle effects is proportionality bias, the belief that big events must have big causes. A devastating tsunami must be divine punishment. A beautiful sunset, proof of a creator. We resist the idea that something vast and awe-inspiring could come from natural, indifferent processes. But that's exactly what science shows us. The universe doesn't have to care about us to be magnificent. What's fascinating and disturbing is how well religion bundles these biases together. On their own, each one can influence thinking. But when combined, they create a powerful system of belief that feels self-justifying. That's the key. The structure of religious thought isn't just emotionally satisfying, it's cognitively sticky. It feels like truth because it aligns with how the brain likes to work, quickly, socially, and emotionally. That doesn't mean everyone who believes is irrational or gullible. It means belief systems can take hold without logic. And once they do, they're hard to shake, not because of evidence, but because of how the human brain resists change. You can see this most clearly in children. Kids are especially vulnerable to authority bias. magical thinking, and black and white views of the world. And religion often targets them early, before they've developed critical thinking skills. By the time they're adults, belief is deeply tied to emotion, community, and identity. It's not just something they think, it's something they are. So when someone starts to question their faith, they're not just wrestling with ideas. They're going up against their own brain's default settings. That's not easy, but it's necessary. Because the truth, real truth, doesn't depend on how many people believe it, or how comforting it is, or how well it fits your biases. It depends on whether it holds up under scrutiny, whether it matches reality, and the only way to get there is to know how your mind works. To know when you're being tricked, not by someone else, but by your own psychology. None of this makes religion uniquely evil or deceptive. All kinds of ideologies, political, commercial, even scientific, can exploit the same mental shortcuts. But religion has had more time, more practice, and more cultural protection. That's why it's still so powerful, even in an age of information. The good news is, once you understand these biases, you can begin to break their hold. You can spot the traps. You can pause before following the familiar mental path. And you can ask yourself, honestly, not just what you believe, but why you believe it. And that's where real freedom begins.